This is the last video about abs that you will ever need to watch. We will work our way through every single piece of information that you need to know to get a six-pack, even if you are a little bit chubbier. There are two types of exercises that you can include in your ab workout. The first one is the main exercise, as I like to call it, and the other one is more of a secondary exercise. Out of both of these types of exercises, only the main exercise is mandatory, but we will talk about that a little bit later. The reason why I call it the main exercise is because this exercise will be something like the bench press is for the chest. In a sense that our primary focus will be on getting stronger, while also using a lower rep range, which means that you should forget about doing stuff like 100 sit-ups or some kind of 5-minute ab routine. That's absolutely not where it's at. Do you want to know where it's at? Alright, then we will start by looking at the so-called main exercises, which can be, for example, the cable crunch, the machine crunch, the weighted sit-up, or any other ab exercise that you can effectively load. The ability to effectively load the exercise is absolutely crucial, because that's exactly what is going to be responsible for growing your abs. So don't forget this. For the secondary exercise, I recommend using an exercise that is not weighted, because you will be doing it after the main exercise, which means that you will be significantly weaker. But remember, as I said earlier, the secondary exercise is not mandatory. More on that in a second. My number one choice for the secondary exercise would be the chair or the hanging leg/knee raise, because these exercises are more focused on the lower abs, while most of the main exercises that I mentioned are focused more on the upper abs. If you used, for example, the cable crunch as your main exercise and the hanging leg raise as your secondary exercise, then you would get a nice mix of both the upper and the lower abs. But it's not really that important. You can use any other exercise that you like. The only requirement that this exercise has to meet is that it's not too difficult for you, because you will still need to be able to do a decent amount of reps with it. It's cool if you can do a dragon flag, but if you can only do it for like 3 reps, then it's not really going to be that helpful, so keep that in mind. At the beginning of the video, I said that only the main exercise is mandatory, and that the secondary exercise is optional, which means that there are basically 2 different training methods that you can choose from. And that's exactly what we will go over right now. The first method of training abs is all about doing just the main exercise. So let me tell you a little bit more about it. If you choose this option, then you will pick one of the main exercises that I was talking about, and you will do that exercise 2 to 4 times per week. In each one of those workouts, you will do the main exercise for 3 sets. You can, for example, add it as the last exercise of your workout. It will be a nice cherry on top. Because we know that we will train abs 2 to 4 times per week, and each one of those days is going to be consisted of 3 sets of the main ab exercise, we can easily deduce that the recommended amount of sets per week will be at least 6 all the way to 12 sets per week. And when it comes to the rep ranges, we will use the 8 to 15 rep range. This rep range is ideal for what we are trying to achieve with the main exercise. Overall, I highly recommend this method, as it is really time efficient and will for sure deliver the results that you are looking for. Alright, this was the first one of the 2 methods that you can use to train abs. Now let's take a look at the second method. This method adds the secondary exercise into the mix. So let me set the stage. You will also do the secondary exercise for 3 sets, but the rep range will be a little bit different than on the main exercise. Because, as I said at the start, the secondary exercise should be some kind of bodyweight exercise that you can manage to do for a decent amount of reps, even if you are a little bit tired from the main exercise that you did before. Which means that the rep range that we will use for the secondary exercise should be roughly somewhere between 12 and 20 reps. But other than that, everything else stays the same. I would recommend this method only to the people who really want to prioritize training abs, because it is significantly more time consuming, so unless your abs are your absolute number one priority, then just stick with the first method. Alright, so this is the visual representation of both of the methods, which brings us to the next point, and that is training obliques. As you could see, I did not include any exercises for the obliques in any of the 2 methods. So you might be asking, why? Well, the answer depends a lot on who you are and what you do. If you are someone who only goes to the gym and you don't do any sports or any other athletic activities, then you just don't need to train obliques, there is no need. You might actually even want to avoid it, just because it will make your waist look a little bit thicker, which is not the desired look for most of the people that want to make their physique look as good as possible. Most people want to achieve the V-taper look, you know, to become a Jack Dorito. But when your waist gets thicker, you start to go from the V shape to more of an X shape, which just doesn't look as good, because you start to lose that illusion of a wide back and broad shoulders. You also have to keep in mind that genetics also play a huge role. If you naturally have a really small waist, then training obliques will not really mess up your V-taper. But if your waist has always been a little thicker, then I would highly recommend against training obliques, because at that point you are just doing yourself a disservice. Granted, the waist thickening effects are not that dramatic, so you don't have to be scared that you will turn into the default Lego man overnight. That's just not how it works. It just really depends on the individual. But on the other hand, if you are more of an athlete and not just a gym rat, then training obliques actually makes a whole lot of sense. Imagine that you are, for example, a rugby player and you have to throw the ball to the side really fast. Of course that having strong obliques is gonna benefit you, there is no doubt about that. If you find yourself in a situation that you want to or need to train obliques, you can put the oblique exercise in the second method that I showed you earlier. Place it right here, in the place of the secondary exercise. And if you want a recommendation of which oblique exercise to do, you can for example try the Russian twist or the cable twist, both are great. And there is one more thing that I want to talk about, and that is having visible abs while being a little chubbier. A lot of people seem to think that the only way to have visible abs is to be absolutely shredded, but that's not the case. You can still have visible abs even when you are a bit fluffy. Obviously you can't be like 40% body fat, but something like 15 to 20% body fat is absolutely realistic. This kind of body fat percentage is actually really easy to maintain once you're there. Which is great, because if you have ever dieted to like 10% body fat or lower, you know how miserable it feels, and most importantly how unsustainable it is. That's why it's so important to build big and strong abs. When you get to the point where you can for example do the cable crunch with the full stack, with good form I must add, then there is absolutely no way that you would not have visible abs, even if you are a little fluffier. That's why the approach of having a main exercise is so beneficial. If you kept on doing those 5-minute ab routines without ever progressing in any way, you would have never gotten those bulging abs that can be seen even through a layer of fat. Well, that's all you need to know about training abs. And if you want to learn more about bodybuilding, check out my website where I have tons of free resources prepared for you that will simplify your bodybuilding journey. So what are you waiting for? It's just that simple. And as always, a big thanks to all the supporters on my Patreon. Did you like this video? Then you will for sure like this one too.